You ever walk onto your own land and see a brand new building you never asked for? A full HOA pavilion, brick columns, a concrete slab, picnic tables lined up like they owned the place. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd back down. They were wrong. I brought a bulldozer. I never expected a phone call on a quiet Wednesday morning to tilt my whole world off its axis. It came from the estate attorney handling my Uncle Ray's affairs. His voice had that careful tone, measured, respectful, like he'd delivered the same news 1,000 times before, but still wanted to make sure it didn't knock me over. "Your uncle left you his 15-acre parcel outside Austin," he said, "free and clear." For a long second I didn't answer, just stared out the kitchen window at nothing, the edge of my coffee mug still resting against my lip. Uncle Ray, leaving me something? That man barely left the TV on when he went to bed. But then the real memory came flooding back. Ray had spent his last 2 years in and out of the VA hospital, fighting the kind of battle that doesn't give you much room to stand guard over your land. The place had sat quiet, unwatched, unprotected, or so I thought. Something about that realization settled heavy on my chest. Land in Texas isn't just dirt. It's roots. It's a kind of inheritance that ties you to the past in ways you don't always choose. And suddenly, whether I was ready or not, I was tied to his. I grabbed my keys and drove out that same evening, but the sun dropped too fast to see much. So I promised myself I'd come back in the morning, fresh coffee in one hand, the deed in the other. When dawn broke, I turned my old Ford F-250 off the county road and eased onto the narrow path leading in. Rays of morning light filtered through cedar branches, giving the whole place a warm, amber glow. I rolled the window down and breathed in the scent of dry grass and oak, an old Texas smell that always seems to settle the mind. The deed sat on the passenger seat beside me, still folded, still smelling faintly of printer ink and courthouse dust. I kept glancing at it, making sure it was real. The land felt full of possibility. Most of it was wooded, but the southern stretch, that part looked tended, like someone had kept it trimmed even when Ray no longer could. I stepped out of the truck, boots hitting the earth with a soft thud. For a moment, it felt peaceful, quiet enough to hear the wind rubbing through the branches. Peace didn't last long. That's when I saw the tire tracks. They weren't casual marks from somebody turning around. These were deep, heavy. Those weren't just tracks. They were ruts, gnarled into the mud like scars, the kind heavy machinery leaves behind when it chews through the soil without a second thought, the kind that don't belong on untouched land. I knelt down and touched one of the grooves. The dirt was compacted so tight it felt like rock. Wildflowers used to grow there. Ray loved those wildflowers. Mom once said he never had the heart to mow them. Seeing the earth torn up like that felt disrespectful, wrong, an intrusion nobody had the right to make. I stood and followed the ruts, pushing through low branches and dead leaves. The ground beneath me began to level unnaturally, too smooth, too even, like it had been groomed by machines. My pulse quickened before my mind understood why. And then the trees opened. I stumbled to a stop. There, perfectly centered in the clearing like it was posing for a magazine, stood a brand new pavilion. Not a shack, not a picnic shade, a full-blown structure, fresh lumber, brick columns, concrete slab, benches arranged neatly under the roof. You could have hosted a wedding under it. And right at the front, painted in crisp forest green, HOA Recreational Pavilion. Members only. The words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. For a second, all I heard was the rush of blood filling my ears. I felt my jaw tighten. The deed in my hand suddenly felt heavier, like a weapon I was going to have to learn how to use. My land. Their building. And that was where this whole damn war started. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at that pavilion like it had no right to exist. And it didn't. Anger didn't hit me all at once. It came slow, like a pot warming on a stove, simmering in the back of my chest as my brain tried to make sense of what my eyes were seeing. I took a few steps closer, boots crunching on gravel that hadn't been there the last time Ray walked this property. Someone had laid it down to make a walkway on my land, a walkway leading up to a structure I'd never approved, never seen, never even heard about. I reached the edge of the concrete slab and squatted down, brushing my fingers across the surface. Smooth, fresh, barely a few months old. They hadn't just trespassed. They'd built, deliberately, confidently, like they truly believed no one would ever come asking questions. And maybe that's exactly what they'd expected. A sick uncle, an empty lot, no one watching. I stood again and pulled out my phone, fingers tapping through muscle memory. I opened the Travis County GIS system, the same one I'd used 100 times back when I worked construction estimating. The map loaded slow, the little spinning wheel mocking my patience. Finally, the parcel outlines appeared, and there it was. My land. Rectangular, clear borders, just like the deed said. But the pavilion? The pavilion sat deep inside that southern boundary, 10 feet in, maybe more. Absolutely, unmistakably mine. It wasn't straddling the line. It wasn't edging close. It wasn't a misunderstanding. No, this was intentional. A hot wave of disbelief washed through me. Not shock, because shock fades too quick. What I felt was heavier. Heavier than the Texas humidity. Heavier than the brick columns in front of me. A kind of betrayal that comes when someone decides your rights don't matter as much as their convenience. I pulled the deed out of my back pocket and held it next to the pavilion sign. My name on legal paper, and their name on a smug green board, telling me I didn't belong here. I took a picture of the two together. It felt symbolic somehow, like capturing two truths that were about to collide head-on. I rose slowly, scanning every angle. There were flower beds, fresh mulch, trimmed edges. Someone had planted petunias for crying out loud. Benches arranged in a circle, ready for birthday parties or weekend brunches. Even a stainless steel grill was bolted into the corner. This wasn't a temporary structure. It wasn't a community project. This was an investment. An investment made on the assumption that the rightful owner would never come back. Something in me tightened. Not rage, not yet. Resolve. The kind you feel deep in your bones. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I needed to hear from the people who built it, or at least the ones who claimed it. So I found the number for the HOA on the sign. It was printed nice and clean at the bottom. Oak Bluff Preserve Association. I dialed. The phone rang twice. And then a voice answered, cheerful, polished, almost sing-song. Oak Bluff Preserve, this is Karen speaking. Karen. Of course. I didn't know what I expected, but the sweetness in her voice was so artificial, it put a sour taste in my mouth before she even said a second word. I introduced myself calmly, too calmly in hindsight, and explained the situation. A pavilion, on my land, built without my consent. There was a pause, not the confused kind, not the embarrassed kind, a calculating pause. Then she said, bright as daylight, "Oh yes, the pavilion. Your uncle gave us permission years ago. He was so supportive of the community. We've enjoyed that space for a long time." The moment she said it, something clicked. Long time? The concrete was barely cured. The lumber still smelled fresh. You don't enjoy a space for years when the screws on the benches haven't even rusted yet. Her lie wasn't just sloppy, it was insulting, but she kept going, adding honey to the venom. "Well," she said, in a tone people use when they smile while holding a knife, "it was verbal consent. Perhaps you weren't close enough to your uncle to know what he wanted." My free hand curled into a fist. I had enough. Enough lies. Enough fake sweetness. Enough of her acting like I was the intruder. That was the first moment I understood something important. Something that would define everything after this. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was a territory grab. And I was about to push back. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, the deed spread out in front of me like a shield I hadn't learned to lift yet. I replayed every word Karen had said, her tone, her pauses, the way she tried to make it sound like I was the one stepping out of line. I kept seeing that pavilion in my mind, the fresh concrete, new lumber, mulch so clean you could still smell the bags it came from, and her claiming they'd enjoyed it for a long time. The insult burned hotter the longer I sat with it. By sunrise, I was done sitting. I folded the deed, grabbed my truck keys, and drove straight into town. I didn't even bother shaving. I looked like a man heading into a fight he didn't start, but sure as hell planned to finish. Randolph Baines's office sat in a converted brick house off the old courthouse square. The sign out front said, "Property Law, 22 years." The building itself looked just as experienced. Weathered porch, old wooden railing, a rocking chair that never once rocked. I pushed the door open, and the familiar scent of old paper and stale coffee hit me. His receptionist, Linda, looked up over her glasses. "You look like somebody stole your tractor," she said. "Close enough," I muttered. She smirked knowingly. "Go on back. He's free." Randolph was sitting behind a desk buried under folders, maps, plat books, and a coffee mug that might have been glued to his hand for the last decade. He didn't offer a warm greeting, never did. He simply raised an eyebrow and said, "What did they do?" I dropped the deed and the printed GIS screenshots on his desk. "They built a damn pavilion on my land." He blinked once, then twice, then leaned back like he needed more room for the disbelief. "Without a permit? No easement, no license, not even a post-it note." He reached for his glasses, the special pair he used when trouble walked in. He studied everything in silence for a good long while. Randolph always believed in letting the documents speak before the people did. Then he set the papers down and looked at me with that dry, courtroom-hardened expression of his. "Well," he said, "this is illegal as hell." I felt a knot in my chest loosen slightly. He tapped the edge of the GIS screenshot. "You're sure these are the current county layers?" "I pulled them myself yesterday." He nodded. "Then we've got a clear-cut case, and we're going to handle it the right way. First step, formal notice." He slid a yellow legal pad toward himself and began writing in that slow, deliberate lawyer handwriting that makes everything look like scripture. "This," he said, "is called a cease and desist. We give them 10 business days to remove that pavilion and restore your land." I raised an eyebrow. "And if they ignore it?" His lips curled into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Then you remove it." I hesitated. "With what? A chainsaw?" "No," he said calmly. "With a bulldozer, if that's what it takes." Texas law is very clear on this. Any unpermitted structure built on private land, after proper written notice, is considered abandoned property. You can legally remove it as debris. I sat back, absorbing the weight of his words. "So, I won't get arrested for tearing it down?" "Not unless you botch the paperwork," he said. "And I don't botch paperwork." He finished drafting the notice, signed it, and made 3 choices. "I'll send this to the HOA certified mail," he said. "They'll have it by tomorrow." I stood, but Randolph wasn't done. "And I want you to prepare yourself," he added. "They won't go quietly. HOA boards never do, especially presidents who've been in power long enough to think their rules outrank state law." "Karen?" I asked. "You met her?" "Unfortunately," he chuckled. "Then you already know. This is about to get messy." I pocketed the copies, thanked him, and walked out feeling more prepared, but also more aware of the fight ahead. As I stepped outside, the sun hit me square in the face, and for the first time, I felt something stronger than anger: purpose. Because this wasn't just about a pavilion. This was about a line, a boundary, a truth written on a deed that nobody, no HOA president, no smug committee chair, no pack of clipboard cronies, had the right to rewrite. And they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. I didn't even make it back home before my phone buzzed. Unknown number, Austin area code. I had a feeling I knew exactly who it was. I pulled off on the gravel shoulder, killed the engine, and answered. "Hello?" A familiar bright voice chimed through the speaker. "Hi, is this the new owner of the Raymont parcel?" Karen. Her tone was dipped in honey, sharp as a tack. "Yes," I said, "and you're Karen Winslow." A small laugh followed, manufactured, practiced, the kind that tells you someone smiles a lot, but never with their eyes. "Well, I heard you contacted an attorney. That seems unnecessary." Unnecessary. Building a structure on my land was fine. Me defending myself was overreacting. She continued. "Oak Bluff Preserve has enjoyed that pavilion for a very long time. Your uncle gave us permission, and we've maintained it beautifully. The community relies on that space." I could almost see her waving a dismissive hand, like she was explaining a minor inconvenience. "Well," I said, "my attorney sent your board a cease and desist, 10 days to take it down." Her voice sharpened. "Take it down? Absolutely not. That pavilion is community property." "No," I replied evenly. "It's sitting 10 feet inside my property line." A beat of silence, then another. Finally, she said in a rehearsed tone, "Property lines can shift. They aren't absolute." That made me laugh, not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Not without filing, not without notice, not without hearings or signatures. Karen cleared her throat hard. a crack in the polished surface. Well, I do have documentation of your uncle's permission. That stopped me. Documentation? You said it was verbal. It's informal, she said, but it's proof enough. She hung up after promising to send it. 2 minutes later, my inbox dinged. The attachment was a photo of an old yellowing postcard with a beach sunset on the front. Inside was a short handwritten note. Thanks for keeping the pavilion tidy. Much appreciated. No signature, no dates, no context, and nothing about permission. I stared at it and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." I forwarded it to Randolph. He replied instantly, "This isn't consent. It's toilet paper." I let out a frustrated laugh, but underneath it all, something darker simmered. Karen wasn't confused. She wasn't mistaken. She was confident. The kind of confidence that comes from getting away with things for a long, long time. That thought stayed with me as I drove back out to the land. Walking the boundary again, I saw small things I'd missed earlier. Fresh tire impressions deeper in the woods, a plastic flag marker stuck in the dirt, a path cleared in a straight, unnatural line. This wasn't random. This wasn't accidental. This was preparation. They weren't hoping nobody would check the property. They were planning something organized. And the pavilion? It wasn't step 1, it was step 3 or 4. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I pressed play on the voicemail. A man's voice came through, low, shaky, whispering like he didn't want to be overheard. "You think it's just a pavilion?" Static crackled. "Look closer at the county lines, man. They move them. Ask about the revision project." Then the message cut off. No name, no follow-up, nothing. A cold ripple traveled down my back, sharp enough to make me stop walking. Not because of what he said, but because of what he implied. Moving boundaries isn't bold. It isn't risky. It's criminal. And it requires someone on the inside. Up until that moment, I thought I was dealing with a bossy HOA president and a stolen clearing. But now it felt bigger, coordinated, calculated. And suddenly, everything aligned in a way I didn't want to believe. Karen wasn't protecting a pavilion. She was protecting a scheme someone didn't want me to discover, and I was about to tear the lid off it. I woke the next morning expecting another email from Karen, maybe another sugar-coated lie hiding a knife. I did not expect to find a county truck parked at my gate, a white Ford with the seal of Travis County Environmental Compliance on the door. A man in a bright vest stood beside it, clipboard tight against his chest, tapping his boot like he'd been waiting too long. "You the owner?" he asked. "I am." He flipped his word open without meeting my eyes. "We received a report of an unsecured open well on this property. Potential wildlife hazard. Violation if not corrected." My jaw tightened. "There's no open well here. Mind if I check?" I should have called Randolph first, but exhaustion and disbelief make fools of all of us, so I let him in. He walked straight to the old sealed well, the one with the bright orange safety lid bolted down so tight even a tornado couldn't shake it loose. He stared at it, then wrote something down anyway. "What are you writing?" I asked, documenting a potential concern. "Concern about what?" "It's sealed." He didn't answer. He just walked off and left me standing there, heat rising in my face. By the time his truck disappeared down the road, a horrible suspicion had already settled in my gut. This was coordinated, and the week had only started. 2 days later, I got a letter from the Zoning and Land Use Office. Apparently, I was storing garbage illegally on my property. That one almost made me laugh, right up until I drove out there and found 3 ripped garbage bags dumped by the tree line, fast food wrappers, half-eaten leftovers, trash I had never seen before in my life. Someone had planted it, set it up like bait, probably even taken pictures to prove their report. I crouched there staring at the mess, and for the first time, I felt something deeper than anger. Violation, the kind you feel in your bones. Another letter came before I could even clean the trash up, this time accusing me of illegal deforestation. I read it twice, then a third time. If it weren't so infuriating, it would have been funny. I hadn't cut anything except a vine of poison ivy that had wrapped itself around my boot the first week. But apparently someone had seen me cutting protected trees. Someone had filed a statement. Someone who didn't mind lying. The dots weren't just connecting, they were forming a noose. I took everything straight to Randolph. He sat there flipping through each letter, each accusation, each printed photo with steady, tightening jaw muscles. By the time he closed the folder, he looked like a man staring at termites crawling out of a foundation. "This isn't random," he said. "This is someone pulling strings." "Karen? Not just her," Randolph muttered. "She doesn't have the reach for this. Someone in the system is opening doors for her." He leaned back, face darkening. "They're building a narrative, piece by piece. Negligent landowner, public risk. If enough agencies flag your property, they can justify forced inspections, condemnation, even temporary administrative control." "Control?" I said. "Over my land?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, if they claim you're a hazard to the surrounding community." My stomach dropped. Randolph jabbed a finger at the letters. "These are softening blows. They're trying to wear you down, make you spend money, make you panic, make you sell." The words hit like a gut punch, and suddenly the pavilion made even more sense. It wasn't a mistake. It was the first brick in a wall they planned to build around me. That evening I returned to the land hoping for quiet, for some hint of my uncle's peace. Instead, a white SUV rolled slowly past the gate, just creeping along the shoulder like a shark gliding beneath a boat. Dark windows, no plates. When I stepped toward the fence, it sped off. I felt the hairs rise along the back of my neck. Something wasn't right. Something was tightening, and I was standing in the middle of it. I walked the perimeter again, and that's when I saw it. A neon orange warning tag tied to the fence post. "This property may be subject to further review." No agency listed, no signature, just a bright, silent threat in plastic. I tore it off the post and crushed it in my hand. For the first time since this started, I felt a flicker of real fear. Not because of the letters, not because of the planted trash, not because of the county trucks showing up like clockwork, but because it all felt like choreography. Everything moving together, squeezing tighter and tighter every day. I sat on the tailgate of my truck, elbows on my knees, staring at the ground until the sky dimmed into a dull, bruised blue. I was tired, worn thin, and for a moment, just a moment, I wondered if they might actually break me. And that was when the universe decided to shift. The next morning, at my gate, taped crookedly, like someone couldn't risk taking the time to do it right, was a manila envelope. Inside it, a single USB drive, and 5 shaky handwritten words. "Watch this. Don't trust maps." And just like that, everything was about to change. The envelope felt too light to be important, but too deliberate to ignore. I held it for a long second, scanning the tree line, the road, the empty pastures stretching out like open eyes. After the week I'd had, I wasn't about to sit out here like a target and crack open something that might blow this whole mess wide open. So I got in the truck, shut the door, locked it, and drove. Not home, not anywhere predictable. I went 3 miles down County Road 214, turned into the old Baptist church parking lot, the one nobody used since the congregation moved to town. It was quiet, shielded by oaks, and out of sight. Only then did I exhale. Only then did I open the envelope. Inside was a single USB drive. No label, no note. Whoever left it didn't want credit. They just wanted the truth out. I plugged it into my laptop, heart thumping like a slow warning drum. 3 files, each named only by a date. I clicked the most recent one. A screen recording appeared, someone else's hands moving the cursor across the county GIS system. The normal map loaded first, familiar red parcel lines like the ones I'd seen my whole life. Then the cursor activated a hidden layer labeled Quiet Revisions Draft, Internal Only. A new parcel boundary flickered into place, shifted 10 feet into my land, then another version, 20 feet in, then 30. With each revision, my rightful property became theirs. A small note at the corner zoomed into focus. Adjustment approved by J. Salinas. Forward to HOA liaison. HOA liaison. There it was, the smoking gun without a single fingerprint. My pulse hammered in my ears. I clicked the second file. This one wasn't a screen recording. It was a shaky cell phone video, captured close to someone's chest. The frame jumped, swayed, caught only glimpses of chairs and a desk. Most of the time the image was half blocked, like the phone was hidden behind a folder or inside a jacket, but the audio, clear enough to change everything. A man's voice whispered urgently, "You can't just keep pushing these edits, Karen. If county auditing pulls logs..." Then her voice cut in, sharp, absolute. "They won't, and even if they do, I'll say it was a clerical correction." My fingers tightened around the laptop edge. The camera tilted slightly, giving me a half-second view of a face in profile. Karen, standing behind a man typing frantically at a terminal. She leaned in closer to him. Move the boundary again. 2 more feet this time. He'll break once the fines hit. Break. That was the word she used. Not comply, not resolve the issue. Break. The man she was speaking to, younger, jittery, said, "I'm already risking my job. Jaime Salinas can't take the fall for—" Karen snapped. "You worry about your keyboard. I'll worry about Jaime." My blood ran cold. Jamie wasn't the one editing the maps. He was the scapegoat, a name she could burn whenever she needed to. I clicked the 3rd file, another screen recording. This one showed a folder labeled Quiet Revisions Project, Phase 2. Inside were tables, spreadsheets, and internal memos. Nothing dramatic at first, until the cursor opened a list titled Priority Parcels for Adjustment. There they were, owners over 60, heirs who lived out of state, vacant homes, land with unclear survey history, properties neighboring the HOA, and near the bottom, highlighted in yellow, My Parcel. Affected by recent death of owner, low likelihood of resistance. My chest tightened. My uncle's time in the VA hospital, his passing, my absence. They had turned grief into opportunity, turned mourning into leverage. The cursor moved again, opening a draft email between Karen and someone inside the county office. Push Phase 2 early. Once the new boundaries are approved, pavilion ownership becomes a formality. HOA can claim common use rights. No resistance expected. No resistance expected. They thought they could reprogram reality while I was still learning how to breathe without my uncle in the world. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the truck seat, staring through the windshield as if the oaks in front of me held answers. Quiet Revisions wasn't a mistake. It wasn't sloppy bureaucracy. It was engineered, planned, systematic. They weren't stealing a structure. They were stealing land. Acres at a time, one edit at a time, until the maps matched their ambition. But they had made one fatal miscalculation. They thought nobody would notice. They thought I'd fold, or freeze, or run. But now I had proof. Now I knew exactly what they were doing. And now I was done playing nice. The war had officially begun. And I wasn't fighting it alone, not after this. Tomorrow, I'd start making calls, the right calls. And by the time I was done, the whole damn county would know. They picked the wrong landowner to rob. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those shifting lines on the GIS map, my property being peeled away inch by a few keystrokes, and a woman with too much confidence in her own invincibility. By sunrise, the coffee in my cup was cold, but my resolve was boiling. I called Randolph first. He told me to come in, no waiting. When I arrived, he locked the door behind us, and I played the USB files on his desk. He didn't interrupt, he just stared, jaw tightening with each frame, especially the cell phone clip of Karen ordering Jamie around like a crooked CEO telling her IT guy how to commit a felony. When it ended, he tapped a pen thoughtfully against the table. "Well," he said slowly, "now we know how deep the rot goes." "Is this enough to bring the pavilion down?" I asked. "Enough? Yes. Legal? Not yet." He leaned forward. "To physically remove a structure, we don't rely on digital maps, especially not ones we're proving have been tampered with. So, what do we need?" "An independent survey." He held up 2 fingers. "Real-world stakes, physical boundaries, a licensed surveyor willing to testify to them." He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and said, "You still working in Travis County? Got a job for you. And bring the total station." 15 minutes later, a white truck pulled up. Carl Dawson, a surveyor with 30 years under his belt and a reputation for being allergic to bullshit. He stepped out wearing a sun-bleached hat and a utility vest stuffed with measuring tapes and GPS markers. Randolph introduced us, then said to Carl, "They moved his boundary in GIS." Carl snorted. "Figures. County's been hiring kids who think Google Earth replaces boots on dirt." We spent the next 2 hours on my land. Carl moved like a man who had done this longer than the earth had been rotating. He drove stakes, ran the total station, cross-checked old monuments from Uncle Ray's original deed, and matched everything to pre-tampering county plats. Finally, he hammered the last stake into the ground, stood back, and said, "That pavilion ain't just on your land. It's deep on your land. 12 feet past your line, no question. Would you swear to that? I asked. He grinned. I'd carve it on my tombstone. He signed a preliminary affidavit right on the tailgate of his truck. Now I had the trifecta. Uncle Ray's deed, the survey stakes, the GIS fraud evidence. The law wasn't just on my side, it was begging to be used. But there was one more step. Mitch. I drove straight to the equipment yard behind the co-op. Mitch was leaning back in a lawn chair beside his bulldozer, chewing on a toothpick like he'd been waiting for a reason to get up. You look like a man who needs something flattened, he said. Maybe, I answered. But it won't be today unless you see this first. He raised an eyebrow. I opened the folder. Carl's signed survey affidavit, photos of the stakes showing the pavilion sitting deep on my land, the cease and desist letter Karen ignored, the GIS manipulation proof, the environmental firm's report Mitch skimmed faster than I expected from a man who operated 40,000-pound machinery for a living. When he finished, he tapped the papers twice with the back of his knuckle. Good, he said. This protects you. Then he tapped again. And this protects me. He leaned back, toothpick shifting at the corner of his mouth. Folks think running a dozer makes a man reckless. Truth is, we're the most cautious sons of bitches in Texas. You don't put steel to someone else's structure unless the law says it's yours. It's illegally on my land. Randolph confirmed I can remove unpermitted structures. Mitch nodded. I'll need him to confirm it to me too. So I called Randolph. I put the phone on speaker. Mitch, Randolph said, Texas Code 51.001. Any structure built on private land without permit, lease, or owner's permission is considered an encroachment and may be removed by the landowner after proper notice. He's within his rights. And me? Mitch asked. As his contractor, Randolph answered, you're legally shielded, provided you have a copy of the survey and a copy of the notice, both of which I'll email you. Mitch grinned. Well, hell. Sounds like we got ourselves a green light. Only then did he slap the side of the bulldozer. She's ready when you are. There was one person left. Earl. The old veteran sat on his porch, staring at the tree line like he was watching memories walk between the trunks. I told him everything. The survey, the GIS lies, the retaliation, the whistleblower. He didn't say anything for a while. Old soldiers don't rush judgments. Finally he spoke. You got your proof. You got your lawyer. You got your crew. Now you're going to need one more thing. What's that? Resolve, he said. Because when you hit them with truth, they're going to hit back with panic. People like Karen, they don't lose pretty. He stood, walked to the railing, and tapped it twice with his knuckles. And you shouldn't win quiet. When I walked back to my truck, the sky looked heavier, not darker, just charged, like the air before a storm. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't defending. I was preparing. The line was drawn, literally, physically, legally. The survey stakes stuck out of the soil like ribs. And soon enough, Karen was going to learn. You can move pixels on a screen all you want, but you can't move Texas dirt without consequences. The thing about people like Karen is this. Humiliation doesn't slow them down. It sharpens them. The moment they feel their grip slipping, they start clawing twice as hard. I knew retaliation was coming after the survey stakes went in, but even I didn't expect what rolled toward me next. By noon, the neighborhood looked like a luxury car dealership had exploded along the road. Lexus, Tesla, Range Rover, BMW, all of them lined bumper to bumper outside the HOA clubhouse. Their owners marched inside like they were attending the trial of the century. You could feel the HOA energy from a mile away, that mix of entitlement and artificial unity people get when they smell a fight that isn't theirs. Randolph called as they were filing in. They're holding an emergency meeting, he said. I just sent you the flyer. My phone buzzed. I opened it. Emergency meeting, preserving our pavilion, addressing the threat posed by adjacent landowner. The wording made my eyelid twitch. I'm the threat, I said. To them? You're the apocalypse, Randolph replied. Be careful. But I wasn't in the mood for careful. I drove down to the clubhouse, not to start a fight, but to see exactly what she was selling. I parked across the road, killed the engine, and watched through the big glass windows. 50 people packed shoulder to shoulder. Karen stood front and center, microphone in hand like she'd spent the whole day practicing poses. Her slideshow flickered, Birthday parties, picnics, kids running under that pavilion, all staged photos, all carefully curated to tug heartstrings. She talked about tradition, community memories, shared heritage, not a word about property lines, not a word about the law, just emotion, 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 the currency she controlled. Then she clicked to the tampered GIS map, the curved boundary they had manufactured to swallow my land. As you can see, she said, the pavilion rests safely within Oak Bluff Preserve property. People clapped. Someone asked, "Is it true he threatened you?" Karen put on a wounded, trembling smile. "He implied legal action," she said softly. "He raised his voice. He's trying to take what we've all cared for." A hum of disapproval rolled through the room like a tide. That's when something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even disgusted. I was done letting her control the narrative. So I reached into the seat beside me and picked up two things. Carl's official survey map with the straight boundary line, the coordinates, the signatures, the red stamp. My cease and desist letter, the one Karen ignored. I stepped out of my truck. I didn't rush. I didn't storm inside. I didn't shout. I just walked across the road with the calm of a man who already knew the truth would win. Inside, Karen kept talking. "We've used that space for years." And that was the moment she caught movement outside the glass. She turned. Everyone turned. There I was, standing right outside their big, bright clubhouse window. I peeled a strip of duct tape, pressed the survey map flat against the glass. Smack, red signature facing inward, boundary line bold as a gunshot. The pavilion drawn deep inside my side of the fence. The room stirred. Whispers rose. A few people leaned forward, squinting. "What is that?" someone whispered. "A survey map. Is that official? Why is it saying it's on his land?" Karen froze, mid-sentence, mid-breath, like someone had unplugged her whole personality. I didn't give her a second to recover. I took the cease and desist letter, unfolded it, taped it right beside the map. Smack, bright county letterhead. Her name, my demand, the deadline she blew through. More murmurs. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I didn't mouth a word. I just looked Karen dead in the eyes with a calm she didn't understand, and then walked back across the road to my truck. I could feel her panic even from inside the cab, the way her confidence cracked, the way her voice lost its trained cadence. I didn't have to hear it. You can always tell when a bully suddenly realizes the door behind them is gone. By the time I reached the end of the street, my phone buzzed. A single text from Randolph. "Whatever you just did," it rattled her. Good. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Later that night, after the meeting dissolved in confusion and frantic whispers, an email hit my inbox, a PDF full of lawyerly threats dressed as concern. Impending action. Interference with community assets. Potential damages. It was a bluff, a loud one, a desperate one. Karen thought she could control the story in a crowded room, but I had just shown 50 people a truth she couldn't Photoshop, gaslight, or narrate away. The seeds were planted, doubt was spreading, and the next move wouldn't be hers. I woke up before sunrise the next morning, not because of nerves, but because something inside me finally felt settled. It was like the land itself had taken a long breath and was waiting for me to do the thing it needed done. When I stepped outside, the air was cool, still dark enough that the sky was the color of cold steel. Dew clung to the grass, the kind that dampens your boots before you make your first cup of coffee. I stood on the porch, looking toward the clearing. Somewhere beyond that tree line sat a pavilion that didn't belong, built by people who never once thought I'd fight back. My phone buzzed. A text from Mitch. "Rolling in, open the gate." I walked down my driveway, unlatched the chain, and swung the gate wide. 5 minutes later, the early morning quiet broke under a deep diesel growl echoing through the trees. Then I saw it. Mitch's yellow Bulldozer perched on a flatbed trailer, rumbling slowly down the road like a prehistoric animal waking up hungry. Behind him were 2 more trucks, his crew. No HOA clipboards in sight, just men who knew how to put steel to the earth and weren't intimidated by anyone who threatened fines over mailbox paint. The flatbed hissed as it lowered the ramps. Mitch climbed into the cab of the dozer, flipped a row of switches, and the machine came alive in a way that made the ground vibrate under my boots. He looked down at me through the open side window. "You sure?" he asked. I lifted Carl's survey map in one hand and Randolph's printed statute in the other. I'm sure. Mitch nodded once, just once, then dropped the blade with a metallic clank that echoed like a war drum. The sun was just cresting the horizon when we entered the clearing. Light spilled across the grass and hit the pavilion, lighting it up like a stage before a performance. Brick columns, fresh-cut cedar beams, flower beds someone had babied every week, a sign that read, "Members Only, Community Pavilion." My jaw tightened. This wasn't a community. This was an invasion. Mitch positioned the dozer 20 yards out, revved the engine, and the sound rolled through the clearing like thunder. And that was the moment the HOA cavalry arrived. SUVs screeched to a halt at the far end of my property, not at the road, not at the line, but inside my land, tires digging into the dirt like they owned it. Doors flew open. Panic spilled out like a busted beehive. Karen was the first one out. Beige suit, perfect hair shellacked into a helmet. Designer heels sinking into the mud with every frantic step. She pointed at the dozer and screamed, "Stop! You can't do this! You can't touch community property!" Her voice cracked like brittle glass. Mitch didn't even look. He lifted one hand, clicked a switch, and blasted the air horn. The sound exploded through the clearing like a freight train tearing through a canyon. Birds flushed out of the trees. Dust rippled across the ground. HOA members stumbled back like someone had fired a warning shot. Karen froze mid-scream, hair shaking from the shockwave. It was beautiful. I walked toward her with calm steps, holding nothing but my folder of documents. She pointed at me, shaking. You are committing a crime." I didn't raise my voice, didn't match her panic. "This," I said, holding up the survey report so she could see the red signature and the coordinates, "is my land." "Lies!" she screamed. I flipped to the cease and desist she ignored. "This is the notice you pretended didn't exist." She tried to talk over me, but the words tangled in her throat. One of her board members leaned in. "Karen, that looks official." "Shut up, Todd." But Todd wasn't wrong, and everyone saw it. Their eyes darted between the maps I'd taped to their clubhouse window the night before, and the real one now in my hands. Doubt spread through them like a slow-moving fever. Karen saw it too. And like a cornered animal, she escalated. She stormed toward Mitch's dozer, heels wobbling, rage twisting her face, and planted herself directly in front of the machine, like she thought she could stop 40 tons of steel with entitlement alone. "You move that machine one more inch," she shrieked, "and I will have every lawyer in the state bury you." Mitch finally looked at her and smiled. Not a mocking smile, a professional one, the kind a man gives when he knows exactly what the law allows. "Ma'am," he drawled, "I ain't moving this dozer, but I am getting it ready." Before she could spit out another threat, he yanked a lever. Clang! The bulldozer's blade slammed into the ground with a thunderous metallic crash that sent a shockwave through the clearing. Dust erupted upward. Pebbles jumped. The vibration rippled straight through Karen's expensive heels. Her right heel snapped clean off. She gave a startled, choking yelp and collapsed into the mud like a dropped grocery bag. Someone gasped. Someone laughed. Someone filmed with their phone up high. Karen scrambled. Hands slipping, hair unraveling, mud streaked across her suit like war paint, except she was losing the war. And Mitch? He hadn't moved the dozer a single inch. Perfectly legal, perfectly safe, perfectly humiliating. A Range Rover door slammed. Then we heard it. Sirens. 2 sheriff trucks rolled up fast, kicking dust everywhere. Deputies stepped out, hands on their belts, scanning the scene. "Arrest them!" Karen screamed, half sobbing, half furious. "They're destroying our pavilion." One deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, we'll handle it." "No, you listen to—" "Ma'am," the deputy said firmly, "step aside." Karen blinked at him like she couldn't process being told what to do. I walked up, calm as a Sunday afternoon. "Morning," I said. "You'll want to see these." I handed over the folder. Deed, survey, legal notice, GIS tampering packet, photos of the stakes. The older deputy flipped through everything, eyebrows rising higher with each page. Finally, he looked at Karen. "Ma'am, this structure is not HOA property. It is fully on his land." Karen gaped. That's impossible. We've used—" The deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, you and your board are currently trespassing." A ripple of panic moved through the HOA crowd. "Trespassing? someone whispered. Yes, the deputy said. And if you don't clear out in the next 60 seconds, we'll escort you off. Mitch revved the dozer again, not because he had to, but because justice deserved a soundtrack. Karen backed away, shaking, mud dripping off her ruined blazer, the stump of her broken heel sinking every step she took. The deputy turned to Mitch. You're clear to proceed. Mitch didn't hesitate. He dropped the blade. The first impact thundered across the clearing, bricks exploding outward, beams splintering, the grill screeching as it twisted under the steel. Flower beds erupted into clouds of dirt. Every strike was a punctuation mark on months of corruption. Karen watched from the road, shaking, powerless. 15 minutes later, the pavilion was nothing but a mound of crushed lumber and mangled metal. Mitch parked the dozer, climbed out, and handed me the battered members-only sign like a trophy. You want the honors? He asked. I planted it upside down in the mud. Karen stared at it, at me. And I watched something break in her eyes. Not anger, not fear, recognition. Her reign was over, and for the first time since Uncle Ray left me this land. The clearing finally felt like mine. The dust from the bulldozer was still hanging in the air when Karen finally snapped. Mud on her knees, hair wild, one heel missing, the other barely hanging on. Her beige blazer streaked with the kind of dirt money can't wash clean. She looked like a dictator whose statue just got pulled down. And she absolutely lost it. This is illegal, she screamed, voice cracking. He attacked me! He attacked me with that machine! Arrest him! Arrest him right now! She pointed at Mitch like she expected lightning bolts to shoot out of her finger. Deputy Hardin calmly shook his head. No, ma'am. The operator didn't move the dozer. Not 1 inch. You liar! She shrieked. Hardin's partner, Deputy Flores, stepped forward. Ma'am, you need to calm down. Calm down? She screamed so loud a flock of blackbirds took off from a tree nearby. I am the president of Oak Bluff Preserve. I order you to arrest him. Flores lifted an eyebrow. You have no authority here. Karen froze. Her face twisted into something primal. You don't understand, she hissed. This land is ours. The map says so. I held up Carl's signed survey, the same one I'd taped on their HOA office window earlier. This map? I asked softly. She lunged for it, not reached, not grabbed, lunged. Flores reflexively stepped between us. Karen bounced off her like a rubber ball, stumbled, and nearly face-planted again. Flores was done. Ma'am, you need to step back. Last warning. No! Karen screamed. I will not be threatened by some low-level county nobody. Do you know who I... That was it. Game over. Flores didn't raise her voice, didn't move fast, didn't hesitate. She simply said, Karen Winslow, you're under arrest for disorderly conduct, attempted assault, and interfering with a lawful boundary enforcement. Karen froze, not in dignity, but in shock. What? No, you can't do this to me. Flores turned her around. Click, click, handcuffs locked around her wrists. Perfect, cold, stainless steel. All that HOA power, all those threats, all that fake confidence, reduced to the sound of 2 metal rings shutting on her wrists. She thrashed, she kicked, she screamed at everyone, from the deputies, to Mitch, to me, to the sky itself. You'll regret this! All of you! I'll have your badges, Flores gently pushed her head down. Watch your step, ma'am. Karen's knees buckled. She almost fell again, but the deputy kept her steady. Behind me, Mitch muttered, Damn. Wish I had popcorn. Neighbors from across the street stepped outside. Phones came out. Someone whispered, I knew she'd snap one day. Someone else filmed her being led to the cruiser, mud on her blazer, broken heel dragging, mascara streaked. The Queen of Oak Bluff was now a spectacle, a loud, muddy, handcuffed spectacle. When the cruiser door slammed shut behind her, the entire street went silent for half a second. Then I heard it. A slow clap. Just one guy at first, then another, then 2 more. I didn't join. I just watched. The dust settled. The deputies drove away with Karen screaming inside the car, her voice muffled through the windows, and for the first time since this war started, I felt oxygen return to my lungs. But it wasn't over, not even close. Handcuffs stopped the chaos, but courtrooms end the war. 3 days after the bulldozer morning, I got the letter. Certified mail, thick envelope, return address, Oak Bluff Preserve HOA, legal division. I laughed out loud just seeing it. Mitch was sitting on the tailgate with a Dr. Pepper in his hand. He looked at the envelope, squinted, and said, "They're really gonna try it, huh?" "Oh, they're gonna try," I said. "They can't afford not to." Because that pavilion wasn't just a structure. It was the crown jewel of their little fiefdom. They'd used HOA funds for it. Real money, residents' money, money Karen had sworn would increase community value. Now, it was a splintered pancake of wood and concrete shards. Someone had to be the villain. I opened the envelope. Inside was a lawsuit thick as a Bible. Civil damages, for $10,000. Property destruction, emotional distress, harassment, loss of community use. And my personal favorite, reckless endangerment via heavy machinery. I snorted so hard I nearly choked. They were suing me for removing something built illegally on my land. Mitch shook his head. "Well, hell, they're about to get educated." I didn't waste time. I called Randolph. He picked up on the second ring. "You get the paperwork?" "Just opened it." "Good," he said calmly. "Let them spend money. Let them dig it deeper, because we're about to bury them in the hole they made." The way he said bury made me smile. 2 months later, the courtroom buzzed like a hive someone had kicked. Old oak benches, flickering fluorescent lights, the faint smell of dust and paper. It was one of those places where justice didn't just echo, it creaked. Karen was already seated at the plaintiff's table, posture stiff, chin lifted like she still thought she was queen. Her attorney, tall, slick hair, overpriced suit, looked like he wanted to audition for a courtroom drama on TV. She glanced at me once, just once. Then her eyes dropped. Randolph leaned close. "She's nervous." "She should be." "Yeah," he whispered, "but not nearly enough." Her attorney stood first. He launched into a speech so dramatic you'd think the pavilion had been the Louvre. "Ladies and gentlemen, my clients have endured emotional trauma, financial hardship, and the unlawful destruction of community property," he went on and on and on. By minute 12, 2 jurors were rubbing their eyes. One was knitting, and the judge had told him, "Wrap it up," twice. Then Randolph stood. He didn't pace, didn't wave his arms, didn't perform. He simply held up the deed. "This case," he said, "is very simple. This land is his. They built on it. He removed it. That's it." He placed the deed down like a winning hand of cards. "And there's more." Then the paper guillotine began. He walked the jury through every shred of evidence. The deed, the GIS discrepancies, the timestamps, Carl's survey maps, boundary stakes photos, the cease and desist Karen ignored, and the HOA's own bylaws stating they had no jurisdiction beyond platted subdivision boundaries. Every page he laid down hit harder than the last. Karen's attorney kept objecting. The judge overruled most of them. At one point, Randolph said, "Counsel, if you object without a reason one more time, I'm going to start charging you rent for wasted air." The courtroom erupted in laughter. Even the judge hid a smirk behind her glasses. Then came the kill shot. Randolph plugged in the USB. The first video played, Jamie whispering with Karen inside the HOA office. Gasps spread through the courtroom like a wave. Karen sank deeper into her seat. The second recording followed, the shaky phone video with the whispered warning about the Quiet Revisions project. The room exploded. People whispered to each other. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." The judge banged her gavel for order. Karen's attorney scrambled to recover. "Your Honor, we dispute the authenticity." Randolph cut him off, holding up Jamie's notarized affidavit. Signed, stamped, perfect. The judge skimmed it. Her eyebrows rose. "Mr. Whitmore," she said to the HOA attorney, "do you have any rebuttal evidence?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. "No, Your Honor." Randolph whispered, "That's checkmate." The judge didn't even ask for jury deliberation. "Judgment in favor of the defendant," she declared. "Full dismissal. The HOA will pay the defendant's legal fees. Furthermore, this court refers the matter of falsified land documents and GIS tampering to the district attorney for criminal review." Karen made a sound I will remember to my dying breath. A strangled, collapsing gasp, like someone had punched the air out of her soul. Her attorney tried to touch her elbow. She jerked away, trembling, whispering, "No, no, no, no." The judge continued, "Ms. Winslow, until criminal review concludes, you are under a no-contact order. Your HOA is forbidden from attempting any enforcement action on the defendant's land." Court is adjourned. The gavel cracked like thunder. Karen stood, then sat again as her knees buckled. Her board members stepped away from her like she was radioactive. One whispered, "You told us it was legal." She stared at the evidence table where the deed sat, the same deed she had tried to erase with a few fraudulent edits. And for the first time since this entire war began, she finally understood that it was truly, irreversibly over. The weeks after the verdict rolled by quieter than I expected. No more strange SUVs at the fence line. No more inspectors stomping through the brush, pretending to look for violations that never existed. The land finally felt like it could breathe again, and for the first time in months, so could I. But peace has its own kind of echo, and mine came in the form of an HOA newsletter someone slid under my gate one morning. The headline at the top read, "Community Update, Mandatory Fee Adjustment for Legal Restitution Fund." I didn't even need to read the rest. Karen had cost them, badly. Turns out the HOA had to pay the six-figure judgment the judge awarded me. Damages, legal fees, restoration costs, the whole buffet. And because their emergency reserves weren't enough, they issued a temporary community assessment. Temporary, my ass. Nothing the HOA ever charges is temporary. I heard later that some folks were paying nearly triple their usual dues. And just like that, the neighborhood that once clapped politely for Karen at board meetings suddenly turned on her like a pack of coyotes. Funny how people forgive almost anything until it hits their wallet. Still, I didn't celebrate, not yet. There was one last thing I needed to do, something I'd been thinking about since the day the bulldozer flattened that pavilion. So, I called Mitch. 3 days later, we met at the clearing just after sunrise. The air was cool and soft, the kind of Texas morning that smells like cedar and promise. The ground where the pavilion once stood was flat, clean, and calm, a blank slate. Mitch hopped off his flatbed with a grin, wiped his hands on his jeans, and tilted his head toward the cargo. "You ready to make this official?" I nodded. He and one of his guys unloaded the steel panel, polished, heavy, the letters carved deep enough to last longer than all of us. They set it upright while I mixed the concrete. We worked in a rhythm, quiet, steady, like men who knew the job they were doing mattered. When the bolts were tightened and the slab was set, I finally stepped back. The morning sun hit the metal just right. The words shined like a line drawn in heaven. Private property, not for HOA use, ever. And beneath it, smaller, sharp enough to cut. In memory of the most expensive shed in Oak Bluff history, 100,000. I didn't laugh, not out loud. But damn if it didn't feel good. We stood there a while, me, Mitch, the sign, and the empty, honest land around us. A couple of neighbors drifted by, slow and curious, the way folks approach something they're not sure they're supposed to enjoy. One man whistled low, "Lord have mercy, she's gonna hate that." I shrugged. "She can file a complaint." He snorted. "With who? The HOA board just doubled our dues to pay you. Half the neighborhood wants to tar and feather her." A woman snapped a picture of the sign, shook her head, and started laughing. Real, belly-deep laughter that carried across the clearing. Within an hour, it was on Facebook. By noon, it was on Reddit. By evening, someone had photoshopped the sign onto Mount Rushmore. I didn't post any of it, didn't comment, didn't brag. I just watched, coffee in hand, as the world did the bragging for me. Near sunset, when Mitch packed up and headed out, I stayed behind. The clearing glowed gold, the red stakes of Carl's survey line flickering like little guardians in the grass. A breeze rolled through the trees, and for the first time since Uncle Ray passed, I felt like I'd honored him. Not by fighting, not by winning, but by correcting what should have never been allowed to go wrong. I walked over and put my hand on the steel sign. It was cool and solid and unapologetically permanent. "This," I whispered, "is how you keep a boundary." The wind rustled the branches like an answer. I turned to leave, but before heading home, I paused and looked back one last time, at the land, the stakes, the sign, and the quiet that had returned to all of it. Peace looks different when you've earned it, and this time, I'd earned every inch.